Forget every polished Western you have ever seen. Forget the handsome cowboy riding into the sunset with a clean shirt, a sharp jawline, and some heroic glow around him. That image is fantasy. The real cowboy of the Wild West smelled like sweat, rot, animal grease, old blood, and infection. If a modern person stood next to him for 10 seconds, they would probably gag. This was not a romantic frontier. It was a moving cloud of filth, parasites, disease, and human misery. And the deeper you look, the worse it gets. A cowboy on a long cattle drive was less a man and more a walking biohazard. He could spend months in the saddle under a merciless sun without ever touching a real bath. Sweat dried into a crust of salt on his skin, then mixed with dust, then more sweat, then more dust, until the grime hardened into layers. Over time, the dirt did not just cover the body, it seemed to fuse with it, staining the skin itself. Clean water was too valuable to waste on bathing. It belonged to the horses and the cattle first. And when a man did reach a river, it was often cloudy, muddy, and already fouled by animal waste farther upstream. He would splash that brown sludge on his face, call it a wash, and move on. Changing clothes was not a normal part of life for the average working cowboy. On a cattle drive that lasted 3 months, many men wore the same flannel shirt and wool trousers every single day from start to finish. Those clothes stiffened with sweat, grease, dried blood, and dead skin. Now imagine doing that in brutal summer heat, trapped inside heavy wool that never had a chance to dry properly. The saddle rubbed the same places over and over until the skin broke down. Moisture, friction, and bacteria turned the lower body into a constant source of pain. They called it saddle bum, and it was exactly as miserable as it sounds. But the clothes were not just filthy, they were alive. Body lice were so common that cowboys gave them nicknames like seam squirrels. These parasites hid in the stitching of shirts and pants, then crawled out to feed while the men slept. The itching never ended. Day or night, work or rest, the torment followed them everywhere. The only dependable way to kill lice was to boil the clothes over a fire. But because most men owned only one outfit, that meant sitting naked beside the flames while their entire wardrobe cooked in a pot. Another method was even stranger: spreading the clothes over an anthill and letting the ants swarm through the fabric to devour the lice and their eggs. It was primitive, desperate, and disgusting. But on the frontier, that counted as problem-solving. If this kind of dark history is your thing, hit subscribe. It helps the channel a lot. And the horror did not stop at clothing. Basic dental care was almost non-existent. Toothbrushes were rare, so many men scrubbed their teeth with a rough piece of cloth. The result was predictable: blackened teeth, rotting gums, and mouths full of decay. Sugar was expensive, but chewing tobacco was everywhere, and cowboys used it constantly. It stained their teeth deep brown, damaged their gums, and slowly loosened their teeth until some simply fell out. When pain became unbearable, there was no dentist waiting to help. Instead, a man might end up at a blacksmith shop, pinned down while a tooth was ripped out with rusty pliers meant for metal and nails. No anesthesia, no mercy, just pain. The only thing close to pain relief was whiskey, and it took a lot of it to dull the agony. And when nature called out on the range, there were no outhouses, no privacy, no comfort. You found a bush, a cactus, or crouched behind your horse and hoped for the best. Toilet paper was a luxury beyond imagination. Men used whatever they could find: dry corn cobs, clumps of rough grass, anything that got the job done. Grab the wrong plant, like poison ivy, and a miserable moment turned into days of misery. The cowboy diet made everything worse. Beans, salted pork, and hard biscuits were breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Very little fiber, almost no vitamins. It wrecked the gut. Constipation could drag on for days, then suddenly flip into violent dysentery. And dysentery was not some minor inconvenience. In the West, it killed more men than gunfights. Severe diarrhea led to dehydration, and dehydration could kill fast. Some cowboys ended up buried in shallow graves, not because they were shot, but because disease emptied the life out of them in a matter of days. Then, after months on the trail, when they finally reached town, they dreamed of a bath. But what waited for them in a frontier bathhouse was hardly relief. Water had to be hauled, heated, and reused because it was expensive. You might pay 5 cents for a bath and still be the 20th man to use that same tub. By then, the water had become a gray, greasy soup filled with the dirt, sweat, and oil of everyone before you. Instead of getting clean, you soaked in the filth of 19 strangers. This was called sloppy seconds, and it was standard frontier hygiene. Sometimes a layer of grease floated on top and stuck to your skin when you stood up. You could honestly leave smelling worse than when you got in. So here is the nightmare choice. Would you rather sit in reused bathwater or wear the same wool pants for 6 months straight? That is not a joke. That was the level of horror normal people lived with. And even sleep offered no escape. On the trail, men slept on the ground in bedrolls that were almost never washed. The canvas soaked up ground moisture, sweat, mud, and body odor until it became a breeding ground for smells and bacteria. In freezing weather, survival sometimes meant crowding together under blankets, pressed body to body for warmth. Imagine trying to sleep with your face against the greasy back of a man who had not bathed in 12 weeks. The air inside a tent or bunkhouse was described as thick, sour, and almost solid. It was the smell of wet wool, dirty feet, stale tobacco, sweat, and animal musk all trapped together. If you were not used to it, it could make your eyes water. And when the men finally made it into town and stepped into a saloon, they met another frontier nightmare: the communal towel. One rag might hang by the bar all day while hundreds of men wiped beer foam, sweat, spit, and grime into it. That single towel became a highway for rashes, sores, skin infections, and anything else one man could pass to another. People joked it was so stiff with dirt it could stand upright by itself. And as disgusting as that sounds, it still was not the most dangerous hygiene problem in cowboy life. The most serious threat was venereal disease. When the cattle drive ended and the pay arrived, many cowboys rushed straight to the brothels. Syphilis and gonorrhea spread through the frontier like wildfire. There were no antibiotics, so doctors fought disease with poison. A common treatment for syphilis was mercury injected directly into the body. That is where the old saying came from: one night with Venus, a lifetime with Mercury. The disease destroyed the body, but the treatment could destroy the mind. Mercury poisoning ruined teeth, damaged organs, and slowly poisoned the brain. Some old cowboys likely lost their sanity not from loneliness or hardship, but from the so-called cure. And on top of that, the trail diet caused vitamin deficiencies. With almost no fresh food, scurvy appeared among the crews. Their gums swelled, darkened, and bled at the slightest touch. Old wounds could even reopen because the body could no longer repair itself properly. To cover the stink of their own bodies, some men stood in campfire smoke to mask the odor. It may have killed some bacteria, but it left them smelling like burnt grease, sweat, and wet leather. Even shaving was dangerous. Many men shaved with dull knives, the same blade used to cut food, skin animals, and handle camp chores. A small nick on the face could quickly become infected. That infection could turn into fatal blood poisoning with terrifying speed. And hours in the saddle created another brutal problem. Constant friction caused boils and cysts on the backside. When those needed treatment, a friend might heat a knife and cut them open on the spot. There was no sterile gauze, so they packed the wounds with tobacco or even gunpowder as crude antiseptics. The pain must have been unbearable, but it was often the only option. It is honestly shocking that so many survived. Even their water made things worse. Canteens were often made from leather or animal bladders, and after baking in the sun, the water inside turned warm, slimy, and foul. Sometimes it tasted like the animal it came from. Flies followed the herd everywhere and landed on everything: food, eyes, open cuts, and raw skin. Cowboys learned not to look too closely while eating, because if they did, the meal might become impossible to stomach. Which makes the romantic image of a cowboy riding home to kiss his girl after months on the trail almost horrifying to imagine. His beard would be packed with dust, food scraps, sweat, and lice. His breath would reek of rot and tobacco. His lips would be split from wind and sun. The Wild West was real, and yes, it was legendary. But it was also filthy in ways most modern people can barely imagine. It was a world of parasites, infection, reused bathwater, and bodies pushed far beyond comfort. So the next time a Western shows you spotless shirts and heroic cowboys glowing in the sunset, remember what the camera never shows you: the stink, the lice, the blood, the disease, and the gray water they called a bath. Then be grateful you live in a world with soap, plumbing, and a hot shower waiting a few steps away.